Good morning, Seth. How you doing?
Morning, Seth.
Good morning, Barry. Good morning.
Seth, let's talk football first. Obviously, one of the biggest plays in Alabama history, 2nd and 26. Tua hits the strike there, scores a touchdown. Just kind of talk about what Kirby Smart's done there, recruiting-wise, coaching-wise, what they did this season. And Seth, how many guys did they lose off of that team going into next year?
A lot. And it kind of came home for me, just the difference in the 2018 and the 2017 team this week. Their first day of spring practice was Tuesday, and then on Wednesday they had pro day. And on Wednesday, every single NFL team had at least somebody there. There were 4 head coaches, including Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick personally worked out Roquan Smith and Lorenzo Carter and Davin Bellamy and Reggie Carter, the 4 starting linebackers for Georgia in that national championship in the Rose Bowl. So they lose all 4 of those guys. They lose their starting nose tackle, Trent Thompson, who was kind of injured last year, but he was a kind of in and out the starting lineup as a defensive lineman. And you lose 3 guys that started in the secondary. And on offense, obviously, they lose Chubb and Michelle. They lose their leading receiver. They lose their best offensive lineman. So they do return most of their offensive line. They do return their starting quarterback. And they return some key pieces on defense. But they lose so many guys. And this year's kind of going to be a test. There's so many people that are just naturally assuming that, Georgia's like Alabama now. They just reload. Alabama loses all these guys every year, but then they're just as good. They just replace them with a different 5-star, and they're just as good. Well, maybe not. Georgia lost so much in terms of leadership. So many guys that were just the core of the team the last couple, even 3 years, that I think it's really hard to replace. And they do replace them with talented players and talented young players. Some that were recruited by the previous regime, some that have been recruited the last couple of years by Kirby and his staff, and will just be plugged in there. But it's inexperienced talent. And something that was just so important for them last year was the amount of guys who had experience and also just the leadership in the locker room. And I know, you guys as coaches understand that part of it. When your best players are also your best leaders and your hardest workers in practice, that makes such a difference. And that was something that Georgia had in 2017, nearly like every spot. And we don't know if they'll have that in 2018. So there really are a lot of questions about this team, but there definitely is still a lot of talent.
That.
Well, it's a situation probably a little bit, Seth, where people are expecting a little bit more than may be there, as young as they're going to be. But is he a lot like Coach Saban? Is he sort of hired guys that maybe a little bit different, gone about things a little bit different than the previous regime? Talk a little bit about how he's come in there and really kind of molded this thing his way.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is the Saban model. I mean, he saw what worked. He was there on the ground when Saban took over at Alabama. So I think Lane Kiffin made this point in a recent story. Lane Kiffin pretty much talks to everybody, and but he tends to be making some good points here and there. And one of them he made was, all right, so some of these other coaches that have kind of come in, spend a few years with Saban, and then they leave, so they see what it was like. But Kirby's unique in that he got there with Saban in 2007 when it started at Alabama. So he saw how it was installed and how things were changed to kind of fit that mold. So Kirby could do that too. There wasn't a need for a wholesale change the way there was when Saban took over at Alabama. Mark Richt left the team in pretty decent shape. It had consecutive 10-win seasons, but Kirby wanted to change the culture in terms of making practices that much harder, strength and conditioning program that much harder, et cetera, et cetera. So, but luckily he didn't have to change the system. They were still a pro-style offense and a 3-4 base defense. it took a year for it really to come to the fore. 2016, when they went 8-5, they honestly, you didn't see much of the changes. In 2017, you did. In 2017, they're blowing teams out. It was just obvious they were a cut above everybody. And you were, in 2016, people would talk like, oh yeah, we're changing the culture. And it would be like, okay, like how? What? And they're just like, well, you'll see. We're changing the culture. I was like, okay, I guess we'll see. And then went 8-5. 2017, you actually saw it. And they said, all right, this is what we did. We're lifting during the week. We're more than we used to. Where our practices are more difficult, more physical. We're putting on pads on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and just practices harder than the games and that kind of thing. And you saw the tangible stuff on the field. Now, also, they had really good players. Georgia's going to have up to like 3 first-round picks, and Roquan Smith definitely will be. Isaiah Wynn, offensive guard or tackle, could be. Sony Michel could be. Nick Chubb's going to be picked high. The 2 outside linebackers, Lorenzo Carter and Davin Bellamy, are going to be picked up high. And there's a few other guys who get picked. So there's a lot of talent on that team, too. But a lot of that talent was there in 2016, too, and they still went 8-5. So it was the year 2 effect, and you see it all the time, where it takes, you have kind of one rough year, and it happened with Saban at Alabama, too. And they took off his second year just the way they took off in Kirby's second year here.
Good.
Yeah, Kirby is competitive. Saban's competitive. There's been a lot of talk about their relationship. And anytime you leave, the relationship always changes, when you're recruiting against each other. Seth, what is that relationship? I don't think Alabama can go into Georgia and get recruits as easily as they used to. I think Kirby and them have closed the borders on that. There's a lot of talk that Kirby took a picture of the recruiting board on his way out and used it against Alabama. I don't know whether that's true or whether it's not true, but it shows you that he's going to be a relentless recruiter there. What is the relationship between Saban and Kirby now?
Everything I could tell, being around them a few times in the lead up to the playoff and the championship game, is it's still a good relationship. It may have been frayed a little bit over the Maurice Smith thing in 2016, if you remember that.
Yeah.
That was kind of Kirby kind of establishing that, look, I'm not going to be a subsidiary of Alabama here. I'm not going to, I appreciate everything Nick did, but I got to do my own thing. I got to help my own cause here. And I think Saban ultimately respected that. And, he can't help but respect what he's done at Georgia. And yeah, they have closed off the borders in Georgia a little bit more. I mean, there's still so many players in Georgia. You're not going to get all of them. But what Georgia did differently this cycle and a little bit also in the 2017 cycle was they basically ran the table with the best prospects. If they wanted a guy, it seemed like they got them. And they were relentless. And a big part of that was they when Kirby put together his staff, he really emphasized recruiting. And, he wanted these guys to be able to coach their position and develop players, but it seemed like the first priority when he was putting this together was he wanted a really strong recruiting staff. And one example of that is continued after this year. Texas A&M offered James Coley, who had been Georgia's receivers coach, the offensive coordinator job. Now, he wouldn't have been the play caller. Jimbo Fisher obviously still would have called plays, but they wanted to hire James Coley to be the receivers coach and offensive coordinator. I believe they wanted him to be the receivers coach, but definitely to be the offensive coordinator, which you'd think that's a title, that's a raise coming. How can Georgia stop Texas A&M from hiring a guy and give him a promotion? Well, Georgia stopped them. They gave him a massive raise, went from $450,000 to $850,000, gave him the co-offensive coordinator title, which doesn't mean he's calling plays, but it means he's got a title, and moved him to quarterbacks coach. Jim Chaney had done a pretty good job developing first Jacob Eason in 1 year and then obviously Jake Fromm last year. Guys coached 2 freshman quarterbacks and nearly won a national championship with a freshman quarterback. And in order to keep James Coley on the staff, Jim Chaney moves to coach tight ends and James Coley goes to coach quarterbacks. So he gets kind of quasi a promotion there. And that was in order to keep James Coley mainly. Now,
the most important thing you said there is they were willing to give him a $400,000 raise. Forget all the titles.
Yeah. But I think also, I would imagine, and I'm not privy to what Texas A&M offered him, but I got to imagine it was in that range too. But I think what Kirby did there was, all right, we'll match your, raise whatever Texas A&M's giving you money-wise, but we're giving you a position, a preferable position for you to coach. And they did that for the sake of recruiting in a large part. So that goes to emphasize what Kirby's trying to do here when it comes to putting that huge emphasis on recruiting.
Yeah.
Jumping to basketball, Tom Crean, maybe a little bit of I don't know if it's a surprise hire or not. A little bit kind of a different kind of guy, high energy, but like all basketball coaches, including myself, it's kind of a different personality that could wear on you, but has been successful. Just your thoughts about that and what Georgia was trying to do with their program.
Well, it was obvious from the start they were targeting experience. Obviously, they went after Thad Matta first, had him down here a couple times, and they thought they had him, but he ultimately turned it down, just said he couldn't do it. Not sure if he was playing around with them so that he could fulfill his buyout obligations at Ohio State, which required him to pursue a job. But Georgia, very intent on hiring a coach who was let go by a Big Ten school last year, apparently, then moved on quickly to Tom Crean. And, he was willing. He was eager. He was ready to get back into coaching. And I don't know what was going on with him in Pittsburgh, or there was interest or not, UConn, Louisville, whatever, but that came together pretty quickly. The statement that was put out by Georgia when it let Mark Fox go was they didn't think the program was reaching its full potential, which was fair. Mark Fox leaves this program in pretty good shape, which I think is part of the reason it was also attractive to Tom Crean. Tom Crean took over Indiana 10 years ago when it was, hit with sanctions and, was a dumpster fire. And they had 3 tough seasons in a row. Tom Crean didn't want to go through that again. But in Georgia, he inherits a program that had 5 straight winning seasons, including, their win totals, I think, are like 21, 20, 20, 19, and 18. And that's the program he takes over. And if they'd accepted an NIT bid, they would have gotten to 20 wins possibly. But what they want to do is they want to go a little further. But they had recruited better the last few years under Mark Fox. So he inherits a team that's got some pieces, and it's what's going to be the key here is how he recruits. I know that's the key all the time, but the problem for Mark Fox's undoing was he didn't recruit well enough the entire time. He didn't recruit well enough until the end. Everyone says there's all these great players in Georgia. How do you not get more? Well, we just talked about Kirby shutting off, putting the proverbial fence around the state of Georgia in football. Kids in this state grow up wanting to play between the hedges in Sanford Stadium in Georgia football. They don't grow up wanting to play in Stegman Coliseum in Athens for Georgia basketball. It just doesn't have that tradition. It just doesn't have that pull. So it's easier for an Alabama to come in and get a Colin Sexton. It's easier for Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke. Duke comes in and gets Wendell Carter and everything. It doesn't have that pull. Can Tom Crean change that dynamic? We'll see. I mean, he was known as an okay recruiter at Indiana, but he was known for kind of doing what Mark Fox did at Georgia, which was just recruit for your system and develop, and get some really good players here and there, like a Cody Zeller. But he kind of found Victor Oladipo when other people weren't offering him. So it's going to be interesting to see. All I know is it's going to be more fun to watch. Tom Crean's style is going to be very offensive-minded. Mark Fox's is more defensive-minded. And Tom Crean loves to talk, and he's going to bring that off-court energy to the program. It's just going to be interesting to see how much people continue to pay attention to basketball once football's going strong.
Yeah. Seth, you covered Dave Odom, so you're going to he likes to talk too. I want to know whose press conferences will be Tom Crean's or Dave Odom's there.
Yeah, Crean's opening statement was 27 minutes at his introduction, and everyone was making a big deal of it, and I did. But all I know is when Dave Odom had his one year, he had a postseason wrap-up session, and before he came in there, the media did a $1 pool on how long the opening statement would be, and I think Pete Yacovelli, the AP writer, won with 31 minutes. Yeah. So I was sitting there going, 27 minutes, that's a lot, but I covered Dave Odom.
Let me ask you this, Seth, and we'll let you go. Was that a lazy hire by Georgia? And I don't mean that you don't eventually get to Tom Crean, but you let Mark Fox go. You go after Thad Matta, which I don't know why they wouldn't know about his health issues there, and then you just immediately go to Crean. And the reason I say that is for what you said. The program is in good shape. They've got guys coming back. They've done well academically. And so it wasn't like a dumpster fire where you had to get somebody in there fast. Was that late? Did they move too fast? At least wait and see and go through it a week or two to see who they may could attract, maybe somebody they could get in Atlanta and recruit better than Tom Crean. Because Tom Crean now has a reputation of being very, very difficult to work for. I've talked to people that have worked with him and just say, "Whew, you got no idea." Sometimes the players don't. Yeah. Was that a lazy hire to do it that fast?
I don't know that it was lazy. I think they knew, like early February, that they were going to do this. I'm interested to see when they actually hired the search firm. It wasn't the same day they fired Mark Fox. Let's put it that way. So I think they had, through intermediaries and such, figured out who they could get. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting that you put it that way, and I think I've kind of detected that from national media types. I think Georgia hiring Tom Crean is seen here among the Georgia fan base in Athens a lot differently than it's seen outside and nationally. Nationally, it's seen as, well, Tom Crean didn't win in Indiana. Yeah, okay. He'll see if he can go, win somewhere else. Georgia sounds like the kind of place, that you try to, kind of like Ben Howland at Mississippi State. Whereas, like, within Georgia, it's like, oh my God, how did we get Tom Crean? Great job. Yeah, it's exciting.
Right.
So, and I try to point this out to people. It's like, well, I don't know that Tom Crean chose Georgia over anybody. It may be over Ole Miss. But,
yeah. Well, Seth, man, that's great stuff.
Thank you. Very good job.
Over here in Alabama's keeping a close eye on what's going on with Georgia football for sure. Tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter. You're a great follow. I've got great articles, great insight on the Georgia Bulldogs. Tell everybody where they can find you.
At Seth W. Emerson. The W definitely does not stand for winner.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you, Seth.
All right.
Appreciate it.
All right, wait.